Intel Update, January 2020. World banking crisis averted. Quite possible. Debt crisis and imminent global recession averted. Most of the world's big banks are owned by the cabal. They've been running the banks like the mafia forever. They launder, outright steal from our bank accounts, manipulate currencies and money markets, causing crashes and very much more. They gave out housing loans to people who couldn't afford them, causing the housing crisis. And lately, they've been handing out credit cards like lollipops to send little people into a global debt crisis and to send us broke and buy up everything for pennies in the dollar. We're already in a recession as a result, but it is and was about to get really, really bad, worse than ever. But all that might have been averted by the most powerful person on the planet that very few people know about. Kim Ann Cogan was assigned trustee of the Manor World Holding Trust. It was owned by the Rothschilds and run by the Rothschilds, and it is where they stashed all the cash and assets they stole from us, the people. Well, Kim is one of us, and using their laws, she booted them out of the trust and seized control of the lot. All of the world's central banks, Federal Reserve, the IMF, the UN, the World Bank, and many, many more. One thing she didn't take ownership of was the debts that were run up by the Rothschilds. They had built up over the last 500 years. They borrowed from the trust on behalf of the world's militaries, which are owned by private corporations, not governments. Agencies like the CIA, the UN, the IMF, the Fed, and the central banking system, which includes Deutsche Bank and HSBC, just to name a few. Plus, they took out bonds, treasury bonds, and banked these bonds against all our birth certificates that the trust funded. In other words, they scammed a hell of a lot of cash out of the system they created, double dipping from stolen funds, if you like. After this, they tried to pull the wool over Kim's eyes yet again. So on New Year's Eve, she had had enough and called in all those debts, totaling a staggering $16.8 quadrillion to be exact. They had until Friday just gone to pay up. They didn't. So Kim divvied up all of those debts and transferred ownership of the debts to the various countries around the world. The Rothschilds and the militaries and the various big banks, etc. Now they owe each country that debt. Each country can now call in those debts from those individual banks, etc. If they can't pay, the countries can take out a lien against those debts and buy up all the shares in said banks and military agencies and take back ownership, thus finally nationalizing all those cabal banks and militaries, etc. The people of each country will now own them. Ordinarily, governments bail out the banks using taxpayer dollars. Well, now, by using liens against the bank's debts to bail out them and buy them back, world banking crisis averted. Well, Kim was waiting for politicians to take up sovereignty and sort all this out for themselves. But they've dragged their feet, so she's taken the bull by the horns and has quite possibly saved all of us. Thank you, Kim. Will it save us from the coming debt crisis? Hard to say, but we'll be able to boot out the criminal CEOs and board members and replace them with our own good people, and then renegotiate our loans for much more favourable terms. Credit cards at around 14% per annum will likely be reduced to 1% or less. Similarly, with home and business loans, every country's national debt can also be resolved against all those debts. It will take some time to all come out in the wash, but basically no country will have a national debt anymore. Politicians will keep most of this under wraps for a time, but it is all true. This is the very bright light down the end of the tunnel and talking about. Much more to come. Each country announcing their sovereignty and taking their place within the Manor World Trust. And from there, printing our own asset-backed monetary system and deleting income tax altogether. 100% of it has been going to the Rothschilds for all these years, held within the trust. It's all stolen money, and yes, your government knows all about it, but they couldn't do anything. And until now. It's all coming back to the people. Governments have had to run their countries on extra taxes on virtually everything you do and buy, includes GST, etc. Soon the only tax will be GST, and a fairer tax on purchases that even the wealthy can't get out of paying. Many thanks to Thomas and the THI team in association with Kim for preventing this evil banking system to continue. And from there, the New World Order is bye-bye. Thank you for listening.